I love maps and topography, especially old maps. It's so intriguing to note the differences and changes to an area over time. One thing I love is lakes and water levels. Did you know that water levels change dramatically and often over a fairly short time scale? I hope you enjoy this first part of our series on maps and mysteries. Stick around to the end to learn how you can help save history by noting looting areas on satellite maps. Did you know there are multiple 500-year-old maps that show unusual things in the middle of Saharan Africa that just should not be there? We think that the old mariners were just showing vague information about the interior areas that they explored. Many times things on old maps are dismissed as myth or invention. For instance, we're learning that old description of the vast complex society along the Amazon were actual fact and not the frenzied imagination of starving Spaniards fleeing down the Amazon. One of the more unusual yet fascinating discoveries made in recent years, something that surprises many when they hear it for the first time. Only 5,000 years ago, the Sahara Desert was a beautiful green tropical paradise. Then, around 4,500 years ago, the Sahara rapidly transitioned to the vast, hot desert we're all familiar with today. Mountains of sand dunes forming an undulating skyline as far as the eye can see. The Sahara has long been assumed to be millions of years old due to its size, yet it was not only a beautiful marsh rich in vegetation, but it also featured a gigantic network of rivers, even ranking among the world's largest today. More intriguing is the fact that the world's largest freshwater lake ever known to have existed was smack dab in the center of the Sahara Desert. This one lake was so huge that it covered half again more than the surface area of the whole Great Lakes system of North America. All of this lush landscape that made up the Green Sahara disappeared in an instant of geologic time, only a few thousand years ago. But this dating, 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, was it really that long ago? Or is there evidence of the drying of northern Africa preserved for us by the old navigators? For example, take these incredible maps. A little-known map that was discovered in an atlas by Portuguese cartographer Diego Hammann, who produced a large number of maps and images for the exploration of Central and South America. It originates from the 1500s and depicts a vast river running across the lowest sections of the Sahara, almost reaching the Nile. But could this just be an error brought about by approximation of distances made by the early explorers? Then there's this map by Pierre Deschaliers, which was made for Louis II of France in 1551. This map has a lot of fascinating features, begging for deep study. However, for our purposes, we'll consider the Sahara Desert, which had inlets and rivers of water flowing into the ocean from the north, west, and south, all along the coast, something we no longer see today. And what is this river that flows through the center of the Sahara supposed to be? It takes a slightly different path from the Senegal River, which flows east-southeast into Africa, but not quite as far east as this river is depicted, particularly on some other maps. This was 500 years ago. The early explorers saw lakes and rivers we do not see today. The drying of the Sahara was still continuing. I was able to overlap some of the better maps onto modern-day maps and see that this river could actually have existed. The results were mind-boggling. Yet another map with these mystery rivers was created by Gerard Mercator, 1578. Considered to be the father of modern map-making, he's not prone to errors or exaggerations on his cartography. Although, unlike other great scholars of the age, Mercator himself traveled little, and his knowledge of geography came from his library of over 1,000 books and maps, from visitors and from vast correspondence with other scholars, statesmen, travelers, merchants, and seamen. If it's on Mercator's map, it was what was reported to be there. We see the large river complex we noted earlier, traveling through the lower reaches of the entire Sahara until it nearly reaches the Nile River. It also shows the Nile River extensively branching off in many directions, also no longer existing today. Now, focus your attention on the Sahara's northern region. Multiple rivers appear to flow into the Mediterranean on these maps. It also depicts several cities and settlements or tribes that were present along these waterways. This map was from 1645, created by Petrus Bertius. Though based on the Mercator map, it still gives us a rare glimpse into the nature of these mysterious river systems. Then there's this spectacular map, published in 1652 by Claes Janssen Fischer, who etched and published landscapes, portraits, and maps. He etched over 200 plates, and all his maps included these elaborate original borders. A massive network of rivers running across the Sahara can be seen, with numerous rivers flowing out in almost every direction. Many of these rivers in the inner Sahara have vanished in recent eras and can only be found on the maps of these extremely old explorers, which makes it much more difficult to align with modern geography. However, the attempt can still reveal a lot. Consider also the old legends regarding the Nile. Explorers not only searched for the source of the Nile River, but to learn its path. Old maps indicated the Nile once flowed from east to west. This map shows the Nile River going further south into sub-Saharan Africa, where it then dramatically turns westward. There is a tight bend in the Nile River as the river is then diverted to flow for many miles southwest, following the structure of the Central African Shear Zone embracing the Bayuda Desert. At El Daba, it resumes its northward course towards the first cataract at Aswan, forming the S-shaped Great Bend of the Nile, mentioned by Eratosthenes. This map was made some 400 years ago following the voyage of William Schouten, the first to sail around Cape Horn, 1619. Does it show us an abandoned branch of the Great Nile system, made useless by tectonic forces and the rebounding of the ground in the Sahara, as the weight of the now missing rivers lessened the pressure on the continent? As we know it today, the White Nile starts in equatorial East Africa. The Blue Nile begins in Ethiopia. Both branches are on the western flanks of the East African Rift, but are not considered to extend far to the west. Was there once a river complex which, like the massive ancient sub-Saharan river mentioned earlier, was once in this area? Although to us Africa is a lush and wet continent, it has still been drying and changing, even during the time when the world was exploring its inner reaches. The big question is why we don't pay more attention to the details of the past preserved for us in these early maps. It lets us get a better handle on when and how the Sahara expanded across Africa. These spectacular rivers in the Sahara and sub-Saharan areas as recently as 400 and 500 years ago? This key detail should not be overlooked. Rivers such as these would certainly have been a foothold for ancient human civilizations to have allowed them to occupy the lands around them. We do find petroglyphs in the hillsides of the desert showing swimming people and herds of animals which are adapted to living in much lusher lands. The Sahara Desert has got to be the hidden treasure trove of lost ancient human civilizations, yet it receives arguably the least amount of attention. It is hot, dangerous, and extremely difficult to work there, so not only geologists, history enthusiasts, as well as archaeological community, has not devoted much time to the exploration of the mysteries of the Sahara. The Western Sahara, as well as the whole of the desert, remains literally and figuratively a blank as far as the wider international research community is concerned. This is incredibly unfortunate, as evidence has shown the existence of many civilizations in this region, some dating back more than 11,500 years ago, to a time when the global climate was affected by the melting of the ice sheets during the Younger Dryas. What is waiting to be discovered below the endless sea of sand, which could potentially be a preserve for archaeological evidence dating back thousands of years, or perhaps far more recently, as these various century-old maps seem to indicate. Do you love maps and want to help contribute to finding undiscovered looting sites around the world? Looting is one of the most common ways archaeological sites throughout the world are destroyed. By marking satellite pictures where you believe there's looting, you're assisting in the protection of sites and preserving our common cultural legacy. The tutorial at Global Explorer will train you to keep an eye out for mass clearings by spotting significant disturbances in the landscape, exposed features, or signs of machinery use. Looting pits will typically be 2 to 5 meters in diameter, appear in groups, and have clearly defined round or rounded square shape that contrasts with their landscape, occasionally casting shadows. Whether it's looting in Egypt, Peru, or China, looters all tend to work the same way, and their tutorial will help prepare you to spot them. Don't worry, you don't have to be perfect. It's not just the one time that you ID a site that gets it on the watch list, and the more tiles you review, the better you'll get at identifying true looting sites. If you enjoyed this look at old maps, please give us a thumbs up and leave a comment and share what your thoughts are on these old portfolios and maps showing rivers and all kinds of things happening in the Sahara Desert 400 or 500 years ago, which are not here now.